What we're going to be doing today is have a guest lecture with Logan Larkin. As you can see, he's an artist with a degree in the fine arts in February of 2021. So it's going to be super, super exciting. Combining his knowledge of the arts and financial markets, he set out to collaborate and build with many of the other creatives who are joining into the NFT space. He's also launched and sold out several of his own personal NFTs collections while helping several other artists successfully launch their own projects. And right now, he's currently working on to help artists, collectives, and DAOs ship successful projects while continuing to his brand as an artist. He's going to be giving us an overview of the history of NFTs, and hopefully by the end of the talk, we'll all be able to start launching our own NFTs. I personally don't know a lot about NFTs. I'm a dev at heart, so this would be really interesting for me, and I hope that you guys find this interesting as well, and we have some good questions lined up too at the end. Thank you so much for being here with us, Logan. I'll let you take it away if you're ready.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here, everyone. Hopefully, at the end of this, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about NFTs in general. This is going to be a super brief overview, a crash course on the history of NFTs and the quote-unquote right way to launch. If you follow NFTs at all currently, there's not really much of a right way, but there are certain things that are really good to do in order to launch collections. A brief introduction on myself is that I'm an artist. I'm a professionally trained artist in fine arts. I got my degree last year, so 2021. Graduated from Larkin School of Design and started shipping my own NFT collections probably back in March. I think I minted my first NFT in February. So just kind of been hands-on in the space for a long time now and thinking about different ways to innovate and try to help other artists get onboarded into the space, myself, and just build a community around that in general. If you have any questions, I think it'd be best to go. I have two parts in this deck. So basically the brief history of NFTs, kind of just going over a rough overview of NFTs in general. And so if you have any questions on the history of NFTs, we can answer those after that segment, and then we can dive into like a quote unquote right way again around that to launch an NFT project. And then we can talk about questions around launching projects and ideas and some of the examples. And then also in general, if you have any questions for me and like what my experience has been in the space and how to get involved, where to start, those kinds of things. Let's get into it. So basically, since Ethereum started back in 2015, smart contracts existed, NFT collections have been around and people have been shipping stuff. Things didn't really start to get any attention until Ethereum name service, which I think a lot of us are familiar with, ENS addresses. So your wallet, you can have an ETH address, you can point people to it, but there wasn't really a trading culture around that. There wasn't really a community around that. It was just a cool feature and innovation that happened using smart contract technology. But we saw this kind of larger community start to form around NFTs when CryptoPunks got launched in 2017. And it's actually interesting because on this timeline that I have here, I noticed it says June 23rd. But as a fun fact, today is actually the birthday of Larva Labs launching their collection. And so it kicked off this whole, so 5 years ago today, Larva Labs dropped this on the blockchain and said, hey, here's 10,000 pictures of NFTs. They're just digital pixelated artworks. And it really kicked off this kind of inspiration throughout this community of people. As you can see in this tweet here that I screenshotted, because I just wanted to throw it in there, this community of CryptoPunks, or punks as they call themselves, started collecting these NFTs. This person went out there and claimed 350 for free. And if you know the price of punks nowadays, that's quite the bag that he got. But at the same time, it was the first time that we saw people starting to build a community around NFTs, start trading them. They were selling for $1, $2 here and there. And essentially, people started flipping them, this whole culture around them, and people started going after these rare traits. So obviously, the alien punk, so it's coveted trait that NFTs have, apes, zombies, different types of human trait combinations. Hoodie punks, punked up with their hoodie right here, I think is one. And then essentially, a little fun story is that someone back in the day actually was able to acquire all 9 of the alien punks, which actually all have recently traded for over $1 million in value. So someone at one time had that 9 punks in their wallet. And essentially, if they never really traded them out, if they didn't take the initiative to flip them and market them a little bit, the value that they're worth today really wouldn't have gotten to where it's at. I think last November, that one punk on the screen here sold for $23 million, which is just astounding. I think one of the most unique innovations around CryptoPunks, besides the fact that they're trading and coveted and collectible, is that this community that formed out of them back in 2017, there was just a bunch of people who were super passionate about crypto for a long time, and they'd seen what crypto could do. And so they saw NFTs come out, and then they saw these punks come, and they were, we can build something, we can build a community around that. And so you've seen a lot of these CryptoPunk faces, profile pictures on Twitter, people representing them in the culture around that. And they've gone on to innovate a lot of different cool projects in the space and be contributors. And that kind of has this merit to it. So I think it's a really interesting innovation and starting point for the history of NFTs, because nothing that had ever really been seen before. So it was just super exciting at the time. And the community that spawned out of it has gone on to do a lot of other incredible things and had a lot of influence in the space. And then so jumping into the next part, Ether Rocks is another really great example, launched in 2017 as well. It's a unique story because it was actually discovered, quote unquote, by a blockchain archaeologist last year in 2021. It's essentially just 100 pictures of clip art that someone went out and was like, hey, I'm going to develop a site, launch an NFT project, 100 rocks, some are different colors, some are blue and brown and gray. Essentially, the scarcity of them, only being 100, got the attention of crypto whales and influencers in the space, people that were super passionate about crypto. And essentially, they formed this weird cult secret society around them, driving the price of the NFTs up to over $1 million. I think at one point the floor last October-ish, you couldn't get in and buy one for less than 600 ETH. I think now the floor is back around 100 ETH, so obviously the hype dies off. But the people that collected these NFTs, the Illuminati, that's how they're perceived. And it was interesting, again, because this is the first time we're seeing communities that form around these and generate these similar to DAOs, this kind of access and collective hive mindset of how do we build stuff? How do we push this forward? How do we keep the conversation going? And so even though these are just literally clip art rocks, we have this insane value driven out of it, which is super incredible. Another two there's one project that I think is really incredible, but also Mooncat Rescue, which got dropped or got discovered also last year, was another project that kind of tried to do the whole Ether Rocks thing where someone found it on the blockchain and was like, holy crap, this cool collection. We got to go and rescue these mooncats. They literally were going out and quote unquote rescuing them from the blockchain that they were from the contract that they were found in. And there was, I think, 16,000 or so rescued. And they introduced a really cool concept of composability. Essentially, no one really owned them. So people were able to take the NFTs and do what they wanted with them and go and create their own collections out of them and modify the original artwork and everything, which is what led to their downfall in popularity in the last year, because people were essentially trying to make another CryptoPunks popular cult community around it. And it just didn't really work because it wasn't as deep rooted and as historic as CryptoPunks, just because CryptoPunks have been around so much longer. But Mooncats are still a cool project to talk about on here. Another one that I think is really exciting is Digital Zones. It's just an artist, this guy, Mitchell F. Chan, who was experimenting and researching NFTs for some time. And people have been conceptualizing the concept of NFTs since the 90s about digital trading cards and digital things that you could do that would be non-fungible. And this guy went out and created these paper non-fungible tokens and wrote down on them and described his whole thing to it. And a lot of the collectors in the space just really enjoyed his research and his dedication to NFTs over the years, all of the hype around NFTs. And so this guy as an artist has done a lot of cool things and made a lot of contributions to the space just from research. So if you ever want to go down a wormhole, this guy's great. The people around him are awesome. You can just Google him or look him up on Twitter and see his other projects, which are pretty exciting. And then another project launched in 2017 was CryptoKitties. And I think CryptoKitties is more of a fun one just because it has a little bit of history from both the people that launched the collection. So this consistency of the products they're outputting. But CryptoKitties were essentially these cats on the blockchain that you could breed. And so you could collect a cat and then collect another cat and then make another cat from those two cats. And so there's over 2 million now. So the scarcity of them and the value of them has decreased rapidly just because of supply and demand. But the original Genesis cats are still quite valuable. And it did introduce this idea of token utility and what you can do with them and how you can gamify it a little bit, which you'll start to see become more centered of the conversation in the future or in more recent times. I'm saying future as if we're not living it right now. But so that essentially brings us all the way around to 2018, which is when things started to get a little bit more, the conversation around NFTs actually became more familiar to people, and platforms Super Rare and OpenSea took off a little bit and started supporting artists. And essentially platforms allowed artists to break out of the traditional arts communities. And essentially I wouldn't be here today if platforms like Super Rare didn't exist and weren't onboarding artists and trying to get people excited about, hey, we have a space, you can sell your work, you can own your work, you get royalties for it. And this whole idea was super novel to a community of people who had no experience in crypto, no experience in tech, and including myself, right? I had dabbled in finance for a while and been interested in tech just passively, but until I saw platforms like Super Rare, I had no idea that this was even a possibility for an artist like myself, my friends. And so these two artists here, extremely historic actually, because of just they were the first people on the platform. Xcopy is super popular these days. I think he's still doing a lot of really cool stuff. Cole D is a little bit more quiet these days, but both these artists were launching stuff back in 2018. This Xcopy piece was the first one he did in April 2018. This Cole D piece was done in July 2018, and Xcopy has done just insane volume financially. I think his last collection did $23 million in a day, which was insane, but his older pieces also collect really high values as well. And they're an inspiration for a lot of artists in the space. They're an inspiration for myself. And I'd say even more so for digital artists, people that are creating VR, AR, people that are making just working in Procreate or working digital mediums and animation, people that haven't really had a space ever to advocate for themselves, that were doing digital art on platforms like DeviantArt or Tumblr. Xcopy got popular off of Tumblr, which is why he was able to sell some of those pieces really early on Super Rare for $15. And that was incredible at the time. And so I think Super Rare has this kind of, I think they had a lot of really strong history and contributions made to the overall NFT ecosystem. And then another two projects that were launched in 2018. I don't get super excited about links. I think it's highly speculative still, but Decentraland and Crypto Foxholes are very honorable mentions, in my opinion. They are both projects that are very popular today still. People go in there and they buy land, and then there's this whole conversation around land scarcity. And essentially what you need to do is capture a user base. And so Decentraland, I think, is still quite popular because there's quite a few users that use it. But what's the point of having all this land if no one really runs around in the world and does anything with it? But they did introduce the idea of the metaverse. And so I don't think they introduced the idea of the metaverse. It's a broad sweeping statement, but this whole conversation around the metaverse really started with them. And I think Facebook even moving into, they're changing their name to Meta and talking about creating these digital worlds and digital ecosystems for people to participate in. We'll get to Bored Ape in a second as well, but they recently did their Yuga Land sale, which did $120 million of volume and 100,000 plots. And so there's, again, this whole scarcity conversation around land, which I think is weird because it's a digital space. We can go and invent it, but I think capturing users is a really important thing to focus on when we're talking about land in the metaverse. And then Axie Infinity is pretty popular. They've recently had some kind of hiccups in their own kind of ecosystem. They had that large hack that happened on their Rodent wallets, but they have, I think, done probably the best as far as introducing this concept of play to earn NFTs. They are popular for the people who have been participating from a very early stage in their game, but as far as popularity and user onboarding, it's slowed down quite a bit. But the innovation that they contributed to the space, I think, largely was this concept of play to earn. So the time you spend in the game, you can earn tokens. Those tokens have value. So the more tokens you can earn, the more NFTs you have, the more money you get. And it's this whole concept of either passive income, but also just being able to play video games and actually make money, which is pretty crazy. However, they introduced the play to earn concept. They also introduced the time spent to earn versus spending time doing innovative things in the game, leveling up or becoming actually good at the game. So they have this weird economy around the game where you can essentially sponsor someone to go play for you and rent your NFT out to them. And you can pay them less and they'll pay you a cutback of that. And so essentially you can go out if you're rich and buy a bunch of the really rare NFTs for the game and rent them out to people that are just making minimum wage and take a cut from all of that. So it's an interesting economy and conversation around what is play to earn and how should play to earn be structured going forward in the future. And I think there's a few projects that are doing pretty good job at least thinking about it right now. I don't know as far as executing, because Axie Infinity still has been able to maintain a large share of the market as far as GameFi is concerned. And then 2020 happened. And so up until then, there was a bunch of projects, but in the grand scheme of what NFTs have become recently, there wasn't much projects out there, maybe 100, 200, 300 notable ones. And of those notable ones, only 1% actually are still around today or still building and inventing today. But 2020 happened, we all moved online, started working from home. This conversation around what is metaverse started arising, and some of the more large sales in the NFT started to happen. Made the slide blank because 2020 is just a blank slate, in my opinion. But early 2021 came around and people sold some work early or late 2020 for a couple $1 million, but then 2021 comes around and he sells his piece for $69 million. And obviously it makes headlines everywhere. If you missed this headline, I don't know where you were at, but it was pretty crazy. Clubhouse was blowing up with people that were interested and curious about NFTs, myself included. I was spending hours a day just in Clubhouse listening to people talk about their projects, people that were envisioning different concepts around NFTs. We've moved on from Clubhouse, now it's on Twitter now, but OpenSea starts picking up volume. The mainstream audience starts to get curious. There's a lot of bad, good misinformation, different types of press going out about NFTs in general. And you see a lot of artists and creatives start joining the space, which I think has had major contribution to my life because I've been able to do the space as far as participating in building a community of people that I really hang out with, but also in a lot of people's lives as far as getting this interesting creator ownership back of what you make is what you own, and there's a whole value conversation around that. And then ETH prices obviously start to skyrocket. DeFi projects are also doing very well at the same time. And so it's just a kind of interesting renaissance of ideas and people come flooding into the space, just spitballing stuff, wanting to build things. And there's just a lot of excitement in general. And then I wrap up the history of NFTs with this project. And if you don't know this project, it's Bored Ape Yacht Club. That's probably the most popular in conversation currently. There's a lot of different controversies around it in general, just because of just its popularity and how fast it rose. And there's a lot of speculation around it. And the reason I end the history of NFTs on this is because I think everything that's been launched since then is still very highly speculative, super new. And I don't want to bring up any conversations around NFT projects that have been launched since then, because we don't really know where they're going. And I think Bored Ape Yacht Club is super unique in the way that it built a $1 billion brand in like less than 6 months. And now it's worth several $1 billion. And they did introduce a lot of new kind of conversations around NFTs that hadn't been happening up until the point they launched in March. I think it was for 0.08 ETH. So there was 10,000 available. It took a week for them to sell out, which is pretty crazy nowadays, given that some projects sell out within a matter of minutes. A few crypto influencers essentially went in and bought 500 and they were just giving them out for free, which onboarded a bunch of people. And it became, in a lot of ways, a counterculture to CryptoPunks at the time, because CryptoPunks were seen as the most coveted NFTs in the space back in March. People that had owned CryptoPunks or had a lot of CryptoPunks in their wallet were some of the more influential people on Twitter, and also people who were just building projects in general. But the ego part of that community got to them, and they weren't really onboarding new people, new ideas, and there was this large influx of new people into crypto, and Bored Ape Yacht Club was that solution. Whether it happened by accident, whether it happened on purpose, people started forming a community around Bored Ape Yacht Club in rejection of CryptoPunks. And that started pushing a lot of value into their ecosystem. And so nowadays you see a lot of, similar to CryptoPunks, you see a lot of Bored Ape Yacht Club holders essentially also putting out new projects and building stuff. And essentially, if you were able to hold on to your Bored Ape from the day of mint until today, through all of their airdrops and loyalty reward systems that they put out. They've launched more Ape Yacht Club and Bored Ape Kennel Club and a token and land and so on and so forth. You probably, if you had held onto all of that, you would have probably made about $1 million, which is just completely mental for investing $200 into NFTs. And I think it's an anomaly that maybe only happens once, but I do think that there is a lot of justification for why it happened, whether or not it's hype or speculation. I do think the community that formed around Bored Ape Yacht Club went on to create a bunch of derivative projects. Now there's thousands of NFT projects that are out there and exist. A lot of them are just completely just irrelevant now. They're dust. Now you see the projects launching crazy lizards or cool cats. So basically just take an animal, add an adjective, and you have a 10K project. And Bored Ape really caused all of that. So now without them, I think now they've probably secured their place pretty confidently in the history of NFTs. And so I think it's a good place to end off as far as what we can add to the list of what will be historical, because anything else going forward from that date, which is literally all the way back in March, probably is all speculative, right? Whether or not they're going to stand the test of time. So that's where I conclude my history aspect. I don't know if there's any questions around what I just talked about.
Yeah, I have a few here. I guess my question that I had was, do you have a favorite NFT project? Just to kick it off.
We'll get there. I don't want to go too far into that, throw around some financial advice.
Okay. Why were NFTs denominated in ETH rather than USD? Why was that the kind of starting place for it? Is it just because it was a native and the reasoning for it?
I think honestly, it probably was just native in ETH. And people have always said 1 ETH equals 1 ETH. It's not really a conversation around USD. Mm-hmm. And I think it comes, again, back from the day of when people were just flipping NFTs. They were doing it for fun more so than for cash, because you would take $1 and then flip it into a $2 value. And you were spending literally cents on gas transactions. And now obviously gas transactions are super hefty. And so people were just thinking, oh, ETH is just fun internet money. We're not thinking about it in USD. Same thing we do for any other tokens. But I think honestly, there might be in the future a kind of transition into thinking about things more in USD as stablecoins become popular. But
interesting. Yeah, and then I guess just because some of these other ones are more on the speculative side as well, so maybe we can also wait for them. But just one more, how the NFTs kind of have blown up in 2020. Do you think that was good for them in the long run, or do you think it's a bad thing going forward, if that makes sense?
I think it's good and bad. I think the same thing, if you watch or have been around in crypto a while, it's a lot of speculation comes into the market, prices go crazy, and then prices fall off and people build cool stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think we're in the very same stage of NFTs. They're literally at the stage of maybe 2011 Bitcoin. As far as speculation goes, hey, is this going to be an asset forever? We don't know. But I think it's just early days. And the hype that we've seen is maybe unhealthy amount of hype, but the people that have been on board with the space in general, I mean, we've seen 100,000 people that were interested in crypto go to 2 million people actively trading on OpenSea every day. And I think that number will continue to increase and at a healthy rate, hopefully. And there will be hype cycles, of course, in between.
Yeah, I'll let you continue going.
Awesome.
Shut up and let you go.
So basically, this is when we're going to get into like more things takeaways that I've had in the space. Just seems from projects launched consistently. I don't think there's any right way to launch a project, just to reiterate that. But there are things that I do think help when thinking about launching your own NFT collection or building a collection. And so I'm going to go over those real quick. So essentially from that NFT history and going onwards today, we still see this kind of consistent pattern of these main NFT categories. We have these profile pictures, which form a community. We have art, we have access, we have metaverse, and we have play to earn and GameFi tokens. How do you build a successful NFT collection? There are a few different metrics of success when analyzing if an NFT collection is going to be successful or is successful. You have your financial success, volume earned, sales that happen, community success, how many people are interested, and then educational success. Did you onboard people? Is this something that's contributing to the space as a whole? And I think these are just broad categories to think about, but also success can be anything. Back in the day for me, I just wanted to make an NFT and put it out there into the world. And that was a success for me. So you can think about it more abstractly as what is success for you and how do you want to measure that? But these are just key focuses or key buckets for thinking about, hey, this is what I want my project to do. And then there's key drivers of every successful NFT collection. I think these all kind of are very consistent across all of the collections that have been launched and have been successful. Audience education and inclusivity, proof fair launch, a transparent community engagement, understanding the meta. We go through a lot of metas in the NFT cycle, a strong team, and then the drop of the collection itself, and making sure that it goes smoothly. So deploying the smart contract and having everyone interact with it. And then the long game of how you want to think about your project in the future. And if you're going to commit to it for 3 years, 5 years, if you're going to burn all the assets in a year, those kinds of things. Audience education and inclusivity. So you want to think about your target audience. What tools can you give your audience to help them understand your vision? Who do you want to participate in your project? And how can you set them up to succeed? Collections that understand their audience often receive a reciprocation of passionate fans and followers and collectors, and that's what makes that kind of core community. Having a provably fair launch. So NFT collections lose control when their users believe they've been cheated out of something. So implementing the right tools, audits, methods to ensure that every single user interacting with the NFT collection has the same opportunity. That equal fairness and transparency and trustlessness is super key. So the more information that you can give your community, the better. And then sharing anything in public places that you can about what your project's going to be. So it's visible, Discord, Twitter, website, just making sure that the information that you want to have out there is out there and people can consume it in an accessible way. And then understanding the meta, just the market in general. There's different cycles and different things that are trending and popular. And some of these have been able to stick around pretty well. Some of these have lost their buzzword effect. So one-of-one art, profile picture projects, on-chain collections, Gen art, play to earn, staking, NFTs, yielding, so you can buy an NFT, stake it, and earn a kickback from it. CCO, so just having the Creative Commons open source commercial rights for your project, land and play to earn, and then free NFT meta, which is currently what we're in, is everyone's just shipping free collections and they're just going viral. And then having a strong team. So if you're going to launch an NFT collection, you can do it on your own. I've done a lot on my own, but it is really important to have as many people as possible. And if you can fill all these roles, I think it's super important. You want to have a smart contract engineer. You want to have an artist, a content creator, someone who's going to be able to do the marketing, and then a community manager. And I said, it's easy to have and wear multiple hats. I think at some points I've worn all these hats for some of my collections, but it's really amazing if you can have dedicated people, especially if you're trying to build something that's going to have millions of dollars of value, potentially even billions if you're bored at Yacht Club. And you can always fill these roles eventually too as you need it, but having them up front, super important. I do want to highlight the marketing aspect. I think that something that I've learned from helping other people ship and launch projects of their own is they oftentimes underestimate the amount of marketing that they need to do and just having general brand awareness. And so just if you want to launch something, you want to at least start spreading it word of mouth a month in advance, 2 months in advance, maybe even 3, and put as much effort into trying to get the word out. Either that's through different channels, Discord or Twitter, or however you want to do it. Probably not paid promotion, people organic feel to this stuff. So just thinking about that, making sure that marketing is a highlighted part if you're going to launch a project. And then having a successful drop. So you want to make sure that it's easy to underestimate the stress that comes with launching an NFT collection. So making sure the right steps are taken to have a smooth launch is key. This is when the transparency of the community pays off. So questions about how to mint, where to mint will be flooding in. Even if you've told people exactly how to do it 1,000 times, you're going to get 100 Discord notifications, 100 Twitter notifications. People are going to be, hey, I don't understand how to like mint from the contract. I don't know, the site link is broken, all these different things to consider. Also, I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of user error that happens. People's wallets and private keys getting hacked all the time just because they clicked on a malicious link. So you got to watch out for people flooding and spreading misinformation and links in your community and trying to keep that to a minimum so that people don't mess up and lose all their money. And then also when deploying, strong marketing will always be the most important to carry momentum. So as it's going on, you want to make sure that someone's present, someone's talking about what's happening and managing all that. If someone is flooding the project or people are sharing malicious links, you want to be on the ball and saying, hey, we see this, we're taking action, we're trying to make it stop. And it's impossible to get everything right. But if the team handles the drop, it's a strong sign that it will be smooth sailing from there. It's a good sentiment builder. So if you can nail this component, you're pretty much just in open waters and you can do a good job from there. And then think about the long game. So if you want to build an NFT collection, you want to have it be relevant for as long as possible because you want to be staying in the conversation and building and adapting. So NFTs are highly dependent on the attention economy, keeping people's attention. People are super like ADHD in the crypto space. They're working 24/7. They're getting pinged all day long. And so if you want to stay relevant, you want your product to do well, you need to be able to stay in front of people and be doing notable things when you can. And then also adapting. If you launched into a certain meta and you have a, hey, this is an on-chain generative art project, how can you adapt for future metas? Can you move on to layer 2s? Can you do omni-chain stuff? How can you kind of bring that value consistently to your collectors, adding to your collection, adapting it, and then building for the future? So don't worry about sales. It's not everything. Floor price, people will say, hey, why is my NFT worth nothing? That doesn't matter if you have goals to build for the long term. And a lot of the time it's best to set up that way so that you're not having people FOMO into your project and then all this hype happens. It's better to just have a small tight-knit community at first and grow from there. And then something that, again, Bored Ape Yacht Club did really well was rewarding the community for loyalty. So doing airdrops, providing access to future information, and other things. They have TMYCs in a week, and a lot of collections are doing events and token gated events and access. And those are pretty cool networking. And I think people underestimate the value you can get from those things. There's that as well for rewarding your community. And then here are some examples of successful and sustainable projects. So I think your question, is there any NFT collections I like or would recommend? I'm not recommending these, but I do think they've done a good job when they launched. And there's a few key parts that they did well. And I think I want to highlight those. And I'm just saying, don't go and ape into these projects right now. They've been around for a while, so their prices are fluctuating all over the place. Cryptodes is a fan favorite for sure in the community, launched by this amazing artist named Kremplin, anonymous person. But up front, there was no roadmap. It was just vibes. Literally, that's a quote in the community is we're just vibing out. It was cheap to mint. It was 0.05 ETH. So at the time it was pretty low compared to other projects. It was a stealth drop. It happened at 10:30 Eastern. People weren't really online for it. And there was no FOMO. So people were just minting these frogs. They were, what the heck are these? And it just took off and gained virality in the community because they started the CC0 meta. So being able to have commercial rights for your projects, owning your own NFTs. If you own the NFT, you can do whatever you want with it, throw it on a hat, throw it on a t-shirt, throw it on a storefront. And at the time, that was a conversation ongoing with CryptoPunks who wanted to retain all the rights to NFTs so they can go and do their own branding for it. And Bored Ape Yacht Club, who said, you can't, if you own the NFT, you can do what you want with it, but you can't use the brand anyway. So it was kind of like weird terms and condition things. And so Kremplin went out and was like, hey, you can do whatever you want with my art. Go have at it, create whatever you want. And so a bunch of derivative projects spawned out of this. A lot of collabs happened. And it just allowed to push forward the community around it and the participation that people could have in the brand itself. So I think crypto is really cool and fun, just looking at NFTs in general. Treeverse, again, not financial advice. I own and am invested in some of their projects, NFTs. But the creator is Loopify, who's been around in the NFT space for some time and has a lot of good takes generally on macro NFT markets and crypto markets in general, and has done well for himself trading. But he launched this game last year and it was super small at first. I think it was only 420 NFTs when they were NF trees. And then he went on to launch a larger collection of land plots that will be accessible in the game that they're building. And so it's a play to earn. It developed a strong community over time. So no FOMO, started small, worked bigger. And then they've always been really transparent about the game that they're building. They're building a mobile game for your phone, gacha games style, I think, more Breath of the Wild or Genshin Impact. And essentially it's going to be free to play. And so that's like this whole thing is they want to build this AAA game. They're going to take 5 years to do it. So it's like, don't buy in with the expectation that you're going to see value right away or ever. It's just like, hey, if you want to support this project, you want to support this game, this is a cool way to get in. I think they just did a really good job of setting expectations for a play to earn game, which I think is really difficult because play to earn has this really hype buzzword. And so they've done a really good job of just being transparent with the community, doing weekly updates and stuff like that. And then Moonbirds, which is the most recent NFT collection that has been super popular. I wanted to highlight them because I think they did something really interesting that a lot of collections haven't done in a while, but I think it's probably the most overhyped, probably the most overvalued currently. But Kevin Rose is someone who's been an investor in crypto and NFTs for a while and launched his own projects. And then he launched Proof Collective, which was 1,000 people who were all savvy crypto people that were all involved in the space. So just 1,000 members, and this membership passed NFT. And they all collectively decided to come together and build this Moonbirds collection to expand their community, which was 10K, and it was launched through a raffle. So you either got it or you didn't. And that was one of the fair ways. There's a lot of arguments around how to fairly launch an NFT collection these days, but they were extremely transparent about it. They were pretty pricey, so they priced out a lot of people, which I think also helped their exclusivity of who the holders were. And then they also right away started this NFT staking for loyalty, member rewards. They're doing events in New York City. They're not some pretty big spaces. They did an airdrop that was actually a artist collab with Fremplin. So that was super exciting because they were able to pivot and do that kind of cool instant value airdrop to the community even 2 weeks after their launch. So they delivered their value really quickly. So between those 3 projects, I think they're pretty good. Something else I completely forgot to highlight and I wanted to add in, but I forgot to last minute was also the one collection that I didn't add this collection in because they've gotten a lot of bad press lately and they're not so great. But Azuki, which is this anime PFP, did really well. And they introduced this idea of the ERC-721A contracts, but also having upgraded optimized contracts for gas efficiency. So ERC-721A and 1155D are both contracts that helped move collections along from being able to provide a more fair launch because of the gas costs. So thinking about those smart contract optimizations being an advantage too for launches of collections. So that concludes all of it for me. But if you want to get started, I highly encourage you just go on Twitter, go on Discord, start learning stuff right away, listen, be active, just experiment with stuff. There's no wrong way to do anything. I think that if you want to go out tomorrow and launch an NFT collection, you should just consider all those things I brought up. But yeah, any questions?
Cool. Thank you so much, Logan. So yeah, we have a few questions here in Discord too. I guess I'll start with one of them that I actually found pretty interesting. They were asking about composable NFTs. So the example that they used were different NFTs for parts of a car where you'd be able to like build them on top of one another. Is there any projects that you know of or anything composable? Anything?
Yeah, you could look back to Mooncats. They actually have done that and they've been actively doing that. They made it so that you could like take your Mooncat and throw it in a spacesuit or in different art stuff.
Okay.
And yeah, I think there's a few different ways. I think the one thing to consider though is it's usually pretty gas heavy if you actually want to do it on chain, buying the NFTs, and that's something that's important to consider. Off the top, I'm trying to think if there's any collections I can think of. If I think of any, I'll mention them.
Awesome. And then we also have some questions about scams and hacks. So if you have any more information on any of the kind of scams or the kind of hacks that happen whenever you're launching a collection of your own, how those kind of work, if you could like, elaborate a little bit more.
Totally. I think almost 99% of them are user error. So it's literally just Discord people coming in and saying, hey, I have this NFT, I just launched this collection, you should click this link. Literally just like throwing back to old email scam phishing hacks. I think I see that the most popular or most common way that people get their assets stolen. I think fake collections that go live on OpenSea, they get taken down nowadays pretty quickly. But back in the day, that was an issue where when people were FOMOing into a project that had minted out within like 30 minutes, you could essentially just go and take all their artwork and launch your own collection or launch your own website, just duplicate it. And if someone connected their wallet, signing the transaction, it would transfer assets that they would have pre-loaded to snipe out of your wallet. So that's why you see a lot of the times, I think, Bored Apes being a target of these attacks, because they're probably a mix of the most, I won't say it politely, but most new crypto people who don't have experience in tech with regular old phishing scams and aren't watching out for just spam links. And so you see a lot of the times that their private links being shared or those kinds of things. If you go out and tweet the word MetaMask together, you'll get 10 bots in your comment section saying, hey, MetaMask support here, we want to help you out, going on those links. And obviously you click one of those and you're done for. Never enter your private key anywhere, get a cold wallet, all those crypto things that honestly, I know a lot of engineers and stuff. And so I have people that just, they fall trapped to these things. It happens. You're up at 2 a.m. You just done a bunch of work all day long. You get tired, you enter your private key on the computer. Don't do that.
I literally the other day got an email about something and I was just like clicked on the link, just not thinking, why'd I do that? I just like backed out of it. Be safe. So I guess with that too, I guess the question I had, and maybe this is an ignorant one because I just don't know a lot about it, but what's preventing someone from going out and collecting a bunch of the like art pieces of NFTs and kind of generating a copy of Bored Ape Yacht Club? I know it's not necessarily that simple, but
I think it comes with the whole thing of going back to even the crypto community. There's this whole trust in the crypto space. And so there's integrity, everything you do on chain and it's on chain forever. So you don't want to go out and launch a scam collection. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to go and do transactions and get jobs. The same way that people would go and check your Facebook back in the day when you're applying to jobs. If you're partying, getting fucked up, no one's going to hire you. Same thing. If you're creating fake collections, no one's going to want to work with you. And I think it's just right now a lot of social trust that's happening, which is unique to the space. Hopefully it gets a little bit more decentralized than that in the future.
Because that's just something I thought was interesting. We've got another question around what we're talking about. They're asking about the legal constraints of it. So let me read this real quick. The example that they're saying is that if you're holding 2 Moonbirds in your wallet and you're eligible to mint a new NFT from the new developers collection that has some unrelated Moonbirds utilities. So
just to clarify that question, what I mean, is there any legal constraint to creating an NFT collection that plays off of the fact that someone else's NFT collection exists? So if you were holding 2 from some other collection, you get some functionality or utility in the new collection that you're developing.
I guess I'm configuring that question 2 ways. I think you're asking if you own the art, can you make a collection around that art?
I'm saying, can you make a collection that plays off the fact that there is some other collection from some other artist in existence?
Kind of a vampire attack, the same way you would do it in tech. If there's another collection that's really popular, so you tap into that community and you essentially pull members from that community. Yes, there's no legal constraints around that. I don't think, as long as you're not stealing the artwork, the IP is yours entirely, it's original. But people do that all the time, so it's a great way to tap into a trusted community. So, hey, this community is really not toxic and they're healthy and they're cool people, and we want to give those members rewards. And that's also something you're seeing a lot. There's actually a NFT that's called freemint.xyz, and they actually allow you to go and get access to community whitelists if you have the NFT.
Yeah. Let's see here. I have a question about video games and NFTs. So there's been some talk about, let's say you're in Call of Duty and you have like gun skin or something like that. They're talking about making like these into NFTs and stuff like that, turning skins in games, and not necessarily specifically blockchain games, but I guess any type of video game that already exists, or things in World of Warcraft. I know there's some projects going on that. Do you think that's an applicable use of them or not?
Totally. I think the first thing you would think about is CSGO trading gun skins, right? And those kinds of things have always been around. And I think it'd be really cool to see how they would work on chain. It's one of those things where right now I feel sometimes not everything needs to be on chain. And that might be a thing in the future. And I think actually Ubisoft is working on it. And I'm sure plenty of other game studios. I think Epic has assigned $2 billion over to working on free stuff. So I imagine they're thinking about it. I don't know how it's going to look.
Because I remember I was playing back in 2016 where some of the skins were going for $1,000. And it was this the normal people's video games started NFT thoughts and stuff. Whenever I saw NFTs, that's immediately like connected it with. So it was cool. Someone else was asking, has there been interoperability between 2 separate games? Being able to take your skin from CSGO to Call of Duty, is that becoming a thing in the future? So I guess the meta is working on this, just making a connection between these things and stuff.
Interoperability is a huge conversation in NFTs right now. People are really trying to figure out like how it's going to happen. Like you see different projects that are launching. This gets more into DeFi. I think it's going to need to happen in DeFi first. But like Layer 0 or Omnichain and these different conversations around how do we move to L2s where it's more gas efficient, not as stressful as on the blockchain for mainnet. And those things are all going to happen for sure. That's why I think we're still really in early days, because there should be a dedicated chain for NFTs in general, especially gaming. I think IMX is working on it as well.
There's been no instances of the thing shipped yet, though. You haven't seen an NFT go from one game to another and be able to go back and forth yet in progress?
Not in any way that's making waves. People have done it. There's a few collections out there that have even gone from layer 1 to layer 2 through Portal and those kinds of things. And as DeFi Kingdoms recently went from their Harmony network over to the Avalanche C chain, I believe, which was a pretty cool move in migration for them. So they're interoperable between the 2 chains now, and they hope to move over to Phantom, I think, at some point. But there was conversations around that. But
I think that is what I'm most excited about, is the NFTs coming into video games, because I'm a gamer.
So yes, it's an awesome use case. And I think we're probably a ways out, but it's going to be really cool when it happens.
I wonder if people will start making money off of these games, because I knew someone that was gambling these skins and made, before it became illegal, a few $1,000s. So I wonder if like that'll become a job or something if you're just a farmer of CSGO skins or something like that.
I think also the kind of first instance direction that will probably happen is like DeFi finance. So you'll see people doing D-based DeFi protocols, NFT staking to earn yields in different ways. And so I think there's a cool protocol called JPEG, and they currently let you take your NFTs and get a loan against them or collateralize them. That's pretty cool. because you can get bonus yields on that stuff or whatever you have staked in there. And I imagine people will continue to build it out from there and gamify it, which would be really exciting because imagine being 13 years old, making money, staking NFTs and like learning finance, right?
Going back to the scams and stuff we were talking about a little bit before, we have another question here. How can a newcomer kind of distinguish between the scams and non-scams? I guess just going back and looking on the chain and seeing the original ones, or because I don't know enough to go on if there is a scam or not a scam. How do you kind of tell the difference between?
I think a lot of it's like social awareness, which is why it is a very difficult space to kind of break into currently if you're new to it, which is also why I wanted to give a brief history of NFTs in general, because it's a good way to get exposed to how to think about collections that have been successful and what to watch for. I think it goes down to being able to suss them out on your own, which is really reliant on yourself and the time you put in, which is very time intensive to figure out whether or not the developers are going to be reliable, the artist is going to be there for the long term, all those different types of things that you need to watch out for that are just, you have to do your own research. It's the whole DYOR thing, and that's comes like every new space, right?
It's not necessarily all safe and there's no safety net. Cool. I think we'll take one or two more questions and I think we might be out of time because we're running up on 10 o'clock here. What kind of tools are out there for devs to build NFTs? Do you have any recommendations on those? Maybe we can land on that. If someone's going to build out their own NFT, one, tools for them, and two, I guess my personal question is, I have not a single art in my body. So like, if I need an artist, is there any connecting tools to connect artists or something?
I think here at Macro, it's a good space to start just talking about it in general, obviously. And then also there's Third Web, which I think is working on their own kind of no-code solutions. There's their NFT studio. It's also no-code. As far as trying to make connections with people, again, from my experience, it's just awesome to go out there and find someone that's passionate about building stuff. And if you can deploy smart contracts and you're good to go, you can only do that, but you just need to find someone that can provide a vision or provide something like creative assets or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of tools out there. I think it's a little bit of a general question as far as whatever you're looking for, what your needs are.
I think we're just about done. Let me see if we have any more that we can go through.
One of my questions got asked by Anthony. Another one was, what are your thoughts on L2 NFTs or sidechain Polygon NFTs?
I feel you and I have had this conversation before, but it's always a great question to ask because I think that's where they should be. That's where they belong, honestly. I just think, again, it comes down to this whole user adoption, right? There's not enough people on L2s currently. There's not enough kind of education on how you can get started on an L2. ETH over from mainnet, people have a hard enough time taking their ETH from Coinbase into a MetaMask wallet or those kinds of things. But I think just in general, L2s make a lot of sense for NFTs. I think dedicated chains, side chains for different projects would be amazing as well. Just reiterating on DeFi Kingdoms creating their own side chain, Hub Avalanche to do their project onward. They're not going to have to run into other people or compete with other people as far as getting transactions done. So I think it makes a ton of sense. I think it's going to be really exciting when people start to actually go over to L2s. There's a great project that's currently working on Treasure DAO. It's a cool project that is working fantasy war game. They have this magic token ecosystem, and they're doing a pretty good job.
I was curious about the NFT macro studio. What is it currently up to? What is the longer term vision?
That's a great question, actually, because as of today, we just announced in our company town hall that we're sunsetting the studio. So the studio is actually going to be closing down over the next couple of weeks as we finalize the different client projects we're working on. But I'm always going to be building NFTs. I'm always going to be in the NFT space. So if you ever want to figure out how to build a project or just something related to that, I'm always down to help people figure out how to launch and ship. And there's a few other great brands and studios that are working currently, and they're probably always looking for new engineers or people that want to help them build projects. So I can make those introductions as well. Theo and I working on the studio are going to be turning off that knob and working on more DAO related stuff.
I think that about wraps us up. So thank you so much, Logan. This was super, super awesome. And you did a great job. Obviously, you can come back and talk about NFTs anytime. I'd love to hear more about them. I think everyone else would too. Just anything else that you're working on or any new projects you have, post them, tell us about them. Thanks so much, guys.